So here's something the US doesn't want Canadians to know. The boycott is working. And we know this because the Trump administration told us so. They put it in writing in their own official tariff threat document that Canada's retaliation is gutting them.
U.S. auto exports to Canada are down 22% since last April. American wine sales in Canada collapsed by $357 million in 2025. And their own spirit makers are calling the booze ban devastating. So this isn't a Canadian problem, Dave. It's a Trump problem.
And yesterday, Ontario's representative in Washington, David Patterson, went on CBC Power and Politics and said it plainly. Canada's retaliatory actions are, quote, being noticed. That's basically a diplomat's way of saying it's hitting them where it hurts.
Yep. Canadians have spoken and they acted with their wallets. And this shows us two things: the power that we have as citizens and the absolute farcical and despicable lies that the Trump administration continues to bark, like, we don't need Canada. You don't hold any water, dude, because the numbers, they tell a different story, don't they?
Yep. So let's look at it. The Trump administration just published the single most useful piece of proof that the boycott is actually working in this trade war. This wasn't some leaked memo. It was something that they wrote, they signed, and they released to the public. It's a fact sheet, an official White House document, and buried inside it, like DNA left at a crime scene, is a full accounting of exactly how much damage Canada has done to the American economy.
Now, they published this document to justify threatening Canada with 50% tariffs. But when you read it, and we have read it, it does the exact opposite. It just looks like a damage report to me.
Yeah, their justification for threatening Canada is what Canada did to them first. So they're essentially saying, you hurt us, so we're going to hurt you back, which means that they had to list the specific ways that Canada actually hurt them. And there are a lot of ways that they listed there.
The document lists Canadian imports of American motor vehicles falling 22%. Now that is a $5.6 billion drop. It lists the provincial alcohol bans, like the pulling of American wine and bourbon off Canadian shelves, as a direct cause of market damage to U.S. spirit producers. And it calls all of this unfair trade practice.
Excuse me, it was Canada that responded to being hit with tariffs by buying less American stuff and traveling less to American states. And the White House wrote it down as Canada being unreasonable.
As usual. Because in their model, Canada was supposed to take the hit and keep on buying. So the moment Canadians said, fine, we'll shop elsewhere, suddenly that's economic aggression. The expectation was loyalty regardless of what the treatment was. And Canadians said, no way, man, take off, eh?
So let's start with the travel numbers, because they are nothing short of staggering. In 2024, Canadians made 39 million trips to the United States. In 2025, that dropped to 29.1 million. That is 10 million fewer Canadians choosing to spend their money in the U.S.
And Canadians didn't just stay home. They just stopped going south. Vegas, Florida, Arizona, Palm Springs, all of them are feeling it. Now, the money, it just went elsewhere.
The Washington Post ran the data, and the total U.S. economic loss from the Canadian travel drop is estimated at $4.5 billion. The U.S. Travel Association warned in early 2025 that even a 10% drop in Canadian visits would cost $2.1 billion and 14,000 jobs in hospitality. The actual drop was 25%, not 10, 25.
And it's not slowing down either, contrary to headlines. Total international arrivals to the U.S. are down 5.5%, $8 billion in lost foreign spending, the sharpest annual decline in 20 years. Personal vehicle border crossings from Canada, they're down nearly 19%. And major airlines, they're now cutting hundreds of thousands of cross-border seats. Canadian travel to the U.S. is sitting nearly 30% below pre-crisis baselines.
Now, here's the part that should make every province that participated pat themselves on the back. The provincial alcohol bans, pulling U.S. bourbon, wine, and spirits off the shelves. That is hurting American producers badly enough that Trump put them in his own tariff threat document. Think about that for a second. The White House is threatening 50% tariffs on August 19th. And one of the reasons listed in their own fact sheet is the booze ban we have going.
American wine sales in Canada fell $343 million US in 2025. U.S. spirit makers have publicly said the provincial bans have been, quote, devastating to their sales. These are American producers admitting that they are bleeding.
And the retaliation, it even goes beyond booze. Canada still has tariffs on U.S. cars, auto parts, steel, and aluminum. U.S. auto exports to Canada are down 22% since April of last year. Now, this is partly tariff-driven, but it's also partly consumer choice. Canadians who are planning to buy an American vehicle this year just looked at what Trump is trying to do to our country, and a lot of them decided to go with a Korean or a European alternative instead. And don't forget, when you think about these decisions, they compound, right? A car purchase is a 5 to 10 year commitment. Those buyers are gone for at least a decade.
I know my parents went for another alternative just last week. But here's the part of the story that doesn't get enough attention. What is happening inside the United States because of this? Because the boycott and the retaliatory tariffs aren't just hurting American producers in Canada, they are fracturing Trump's own political base at home. Two of the most powerful industrial unions in the United States, the United Steelworkers and the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, they wrote a formal letter this week to the U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. We all know how we feel about him.
Yeah, and that letter, it did not mince words. These are American union workers, the exact constituency that Trump claims to be protecting with these tariffs, writing his own trade representative to say, stop. Canada is not the problem. Their exact words were that Canada has never been the problem, and that targeting Canadian imports actively hurts integrated North American industries where American factory jobs depend on Canadian supply chains.
And on top of the unions, Ontario's representative in Washington, David Patterson, went on CBC yesterday and said that Canada's retaliatory actions are, quote, being noticed. He said U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer is genuinely frustrated. Good. The urgency is not coming from the Canadian side. It's coming from Washington because Washington is feeling the pressure.
Now, here's the piece that we think matters most for where this goes next. People keep framing the boycott as a temporary measure, something that, Canadians are doing until the trade war ends, after which everything will just snap back to normal and back to the way it was. That is just not going to happen. Canadians have very long memories.
Think about the long-term effects here. Canadians who stopped going to Florida in 2025 went to Portugal instead. They found restaurants they loved, they met people, they got comfortable, and now those are competing travel destinations for the rest of those people's lives. They're not going to suddenly change their minds and go back to vacationing in the USA with fast food and buffet meals.
Same with the grocery boycott. Canadians who stopped buying American orange juice started buying Canadian or Brazilian alternatives. Canadians who stopped picking up American wine found a Portuguese Vinho Verde they like better. I know we have. Every time a Canadian consumer makes a substitution, the original product loses one more reason to come back. These aren't dramatic defections here. They're quiet, permanent replacements.
And for the most part, all of them are more affordable. So why would I go back? And Trump, he underestimated all of this. He assumed Canadian loyalty to American products was structural and permanent. It was not. It was just habitual. And habits change when you give people a reason to change them. Trump gave Canadians 50 reasons, and 40 million people responded. Not with a march or a petition, but with their wallets, which is the only language Trump and his trade war actually understands.
Canada didn't need one big grand move, no nationalization, no formal embargo, no military posture. Just millions of ordinary people deciding that this relationship was not worth the price being charged. And you know what? When you aggregate millions of individual decisions moving in the same direction, you get $4.5 billion in lost American tourism revenue, $343 million in collapsed wine exports, 81% declines in spirit sales, and a White House fact sheet that accidentally doubles as a Canadian victory lap.
So, August 19th is less than 3 weeks away. Canada's trade minister came back from Washington without a deal. The 50% tariffs, it may land, and if they do, Prime Minister Carney has been clear. Canada responds. The provincial bans could expand, tariffs on American goods could broaden, and every escalation adds more permanence to the shift that is already underway. It's more important than ever for Canada to stand its ground here, no matter what it looks like. I'm talking to you, Alberta, Smith and Moe.
So here's our question for you today. If the 50% tariffs go into place on August 19th, how do you think Canada should react? We can't wait to hear what you had to say about this one.
And while you're writing your comment, check out the pinned comment right at the top that has all the fun links to Substack, the Facebook group, and the A-Team.
And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, a hype, and a share so other people can see what Canada is doing to undermine the US.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Ciao for now.